So we had a look at the very basic data structures: numbers, strings, booleans. But JavaScript offers us more data structures than these. Let's have a look at the following. If I have squared brackets and then 1, 2, and 3. What do you think I'll see in the console if I hit run now? Well, I get it printed like this. But what is this? Well, let's check it with type of. It's an object. But actually, yes, it's an object, but specifically it's an array. An array is a collection of values. And this clearly is a collection of numbers here. So we have 3 numbers in this array. And the cool thing about an array is that it allows us to store multiple values in one variable. As you see here, we have 3 numbers in one variable. We also may mix different data types. So I may add 4, but notice that 4 is in quotation marks. So 4 actually is a string here. So if I run this, you see we still get it printed out, but now we have an array of mixed data types, which might have its uses in your program too. Now, while it's certainly cool to have such a collection, you most of the time won't need the complete collection, but you want to store several values there, but then want to be able to access the different values. You can easily access values by putting squared brackets after your variable name when you're accessing it. And between the squared brackets, you put the index of the value you want to access. Now here's an important thing, and I will come back to arrays in a later stage of this course. Arrays start with an index of 0. So the first element, 1 here, has an index of 0. So if I try this, accessing the first element as you might think, what do you think I'll see in the console here? 2. So we're actually accessing the second element, even though I typed 1 here. And the reason, of course, is that the first index actually is 0. So if I hit run now you see we're getting 1. And that's just important to keep in mind. Therefore, the last element is not 4. And if I were to try accessing the 4th index here, or index 4 here, what do you think we'll see in the console? Well, we're not seeing 4, but we're getting undefined. And undefined is a pretty clear message. We're accessing a value which is not defined. We're accessing the last index here, and you can think of this like having an extra comma here. So now here we have a new element, but there's nothing there. So what do you think shows in the console if I now click run? Still undefined. Because now I just made clear what happened before. We have this extra element, but there's nothing here, so it's undefined. Now we also got some other types we can use. This is an array here. If I get rid of it and instead try this, undefined. That was what we just got a couple of times, right? What do you think I'll see if I now hit run? Well, we still get undefined, so we can set a variable to being undefined, but we should not do this, because undefined really is JavaScript's error message of telling us, hey, you're accessing something which isn't there, which wasn't defined. And if we want to set a variable to being empty, and there are cases where we want to do this, where we want to reset it, where we want to clear it, we should not use undefined, but instead null, which also is a keyword and tells JavaScript, hey, this variable is now not set or it is empty, but it is not undefined. So what do you think I'll see in the console if I now hit run? I get null, because now it is set to null and not to undefined. Now, is null the same as undefined? Let's check this, and I'll use an operator which I'll explain in more depth later on, but basically I'll compare null to undefined, and I'm printing the result of this comparison. Now I'm comparing it with 2 equal signs, which means check if the value is equal. And what do you think I'll see in the console? I get true. So internally, JavaScript has the same value for null and undefined, which means it's kind of the same if we only have a look at the value. But if I add another equal sign here, I not only check for the values being equal, but also for the types being equal. And if I now run this code, I get false. So null is not exactly the same as undefined, but value-wise, it's handled in the same way. So we had undefined and null. We have one other special type. I'm going back to printing out the variable, and I can also set it to capital N, lowercase a, capital N. And that refers to not a number. Not a number, as the name says, is, well, simply just not a number. And what do you think I'll get when I hit run now? Well, I get not a number. But what's the sense of this type? Well, typically you won't set a variable equal to not a number, but you might get not a number as the result of some kind of mathematical calculation. If something goes wrong there, or for example you try to multiply a number with a string, which doesn't work since you can't multiply these two types, then you would get not a number as the result, since the result isn't a number, since JavaScript isn't able to get a result. So it's mostly an error message from mathematical equations or mathematical operations. Now with null, undefined, and not a number, what is the type of not a number? What do you think we'll see in the console? It's actually a number, which is pretty confusing since it's called not a number, right? But as I said, it's the result of a mathematical calculation, and therefore technically it's a number, but it's a special number, a kind of undefined number if you want to put it like this. So actually a number which isn't a number. And yes, this is a bit confusing, but basically think of it as an error message from a mathematical calculation. And whilst we're at it, what is the type of null? What do you think we'll see if I hit run? It's an object. And what's the type of undefined? It's undefined. So this is why I was getting this error when comparing both with 3 equal signs, which also checks on type equality. The types of undefined and null are not equal. Undefined is of type undefined and null is of type object. The values are equal. And that's important to understand here.